What's good, IB Nation? Welcome to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. I'm Vince, that's Bryan, and we got a fun one for you today, everybody. Yesterday, we kind of broke down, our Notre Dame specific predictions. We did our superlatives, most outstanding, most valuable, best lineman, skill, all that fun stuff. So if you missed yesterday, make sure you check that out either on YouTube or on the podcast. And today, we're going national. Bryan, we're going national, okay? And we are first going to discuss again kind of a recap of our
and some changes.
And that's what I was going to say. So we got kind of a recap of our conference predictions, but then also some changes. Things have happened over the last month and a half since we started doing our conference breakdowns and our conference predictions and things like that. And so we kind of went back to the drawing board a little bit. We picked our top teams in each conference, and then we put them into the playoff, and we seeded the playoff, and we threw it through the whole thing all the way to a champion. And so this was fun. This was a lot of fun to kind of sit down and just kind of throw some stuff up against the wall, see what stuck, kind of a deal. And
I think I put a little more thought into it than that.
Well, I'm not saying thought wasn't put into it, but there's also some gut feeling stuff to it. There's some analytic feeling to it. There's, all these different things. And at the end of the day, neither one of us will be correct when it's all said and done, I'm sure, with reality. But this was fun.
I don't like how you're framing this whole thing, Vince. Throwing stuff against the wall. We're probably going to be wrong. Speak for yourself, man.
Hey,
okay, stop projecting onto me your
fair enough.
Insecurities.
Everything I just said over the last 30 seconds applies to the guy in the green. That would be me. But no, I'm excited about this because I think we'll get to the actual the matchups and the seeding and all of that in the second segment. So I'll save that diatribe for that. But so first, we are going to jump into the conferences, Bryan, and we're going to go in alphabetical order. So, no allegiance to one conference or another. And we're going to kind of give our thoughts on that conference. So first up,
just who we think are the title contenders. We're not going to rehash the deep dive. We're just going to spend a few minutes on each conference, just looking at who we think the contenders are. And of course, the contenders are teams that are then going to be playoff contenders.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
But looking at it that way. So, because I'll be honest with you, Vince, I have had some adjustments to my thoughts. Some of it's because of team, some injuries that have happened, kind of. Sure. The other part is just re-looking through the schedule. Some of them are a little easier than I thought. Some of them are a little bit harder than I thought.
Okay.
There are some teams that I think are, maybe could be a little better than I thought. Some teams maybe not as good as I thought. I think I originally had two teams from the Big Ten in the college football playoff. Now I have more than two, so it's going to be interesting. Very, very interesting to see kind of how this all goes, but it was fun. And that's what this is meant to be, right?
Yes, correct.
This is meant to be fun. And if you're jumping in our chat and throwing harsh words because you are too emotionally unstable to handle a college football discussion, that's on you. But this is meant to be fun. Now we're giving you honest assessments and honest evaluations. Some Texas A&M fans said we're delusional for thinking that Notre Dame might actually beat Texas A&M.
Delusional? Really?
Yes. Well, again, it's projection.
It's all good.
But, this is meant to be fun. And there's going to be some fan bases that are happy with us and some that aren't. There's going to be some that are happy with us at first and then quickly turn on us. There's some that are going to be mad at us at first and then be like, oh, okay, I see here you went with that one. But at the end of the day, Vince, this was fun to put together. And, and then looking at, okay, what's it going to look like at the end of the season? What are we going to get right? What are we going to get wrong? It's like in 2019, I had LSU in the college football playoff. Not a lot of people did. They ended up going that year and winning the title. Last year, I had Washington as a playoff team. I think I had Washington in my national title game. They did that. Now, I was wrong about Michigan, but I was right about them. I was right about Texas. we're going to be right on some things. We're going to be wrong on some things. And it's going to be fun to kind of watch how this season plays out to see what we are right about and what we're wrong about. As we go, we would love to hear from you guys. So again, the beginning is going to be looking at the conference title contenders, hear from you guys, and then we'll get into the playoff stuff, and we'll give our 12 teams, and then we'll do some seeding stuff. And then we'll predict first round winners. It's going to be a blast. And then at the end, we're going to do a mailbag. So make sure you get those mailbag questions in now. Put an MB on there. If you put a super chat in, like my guy Anthony Solomon did, thank you for super chat. Anthony says, thanks for the shows. I'm very interested in how your playoff predictions look and play out. Me too.
Right.
First things first, Vince. As you said, conference champs.
Right. So let's jump into this thing. We're going to go in alphabetical order. The Atlantic Coast Conference is first up because A is for Apple, and that's the beginning of the alphabet. So we are jumping into the ACC.
Love the thoroughness that goes into your thought process.
You're welcome. You don't want to get inside here. It's a lot of cobwebs and craziness. So, but no, we are going to talk about our ACC, and I wrote down kind of the top 4 teams for each conference. And so I've got those 4 teams written down. And I think that, if we're talking about teams in contention for the playoff, it pretty much goes 4 deep, depending on which, conference you're talking about. I don't think any conference is going to go more than 4 into the playoff. I would be surprised if that was the case, right? I personally, not to give too much away, I only have 3 as the max going from any conference. And so talking about the ACC, my top 4 in no particular order that I have in here that will be contending for the championship is I've got Louisville, Miami, Clemson, and Florida State. So those are the 4 that I have competing for the top slot in the ACC, or the top 2 to get to the championship. And then, of course, to play for the championship. And then, obviously the winner gets that bye. So what say you on the ACC and kind of where you're at and what teams we're going to talk about here?
Really, to me, there's only 3 teams that are worth really talking about as far as ACC title contenders. Louisville would be my next one. But to me, it really comes down to Clemson, Florida State, and Miami.
Okay.
And 2 of them are proven established contenders. I mean, look, Clemson and Florida State, one of those 2 teams has won every ACC title for the last 10 years outside of there was 1 year Pitt won it, right? And then I think Pitt won it. So, it's going to be interesting. The 2 teams we know about are Clemson and Florida State. Obviously, Florida State's coming off of a 13-0 season. They're the defending ACC champs.
Right.
Clemson won it the year before, beat North Carolina the year before. They've won it a lot of years prior to that. They've won 2 national titles in the last 10 years, have played for the national twice in the last 10 years on top of the 2 wins. So they've won 2, lost 2, have also had several playoff berths. They're still a very, very good football team. And I know they had a down year last year, but they have a lot coming back, and I love how they ended the season last year. So, when I look at Clemson, I think they should always be considered an ACC title contender. Now, national title contender, different conversation. We'll get into that, but it's certainly an ACC title contender. Florida State's reloading through the players they've developed, but then on through the portal. They're just kind of reloading again through the portal. Mike Norvell's one of the few coaches to me that's shown he knows how to build a good culture with portal players, so they're particular about who they bring in. And then when I look at Miami, that's the team that has the most to prove, Vince, to me. But here's the thing. Miami, honestly, has no business being in this conversation based on what we know about this team and what they've shown in the past. But you cannot look at what they did this offseason in the portal and what they've done the last 2 years through high school recruiting and ignore the talent of that roster. You just can't. That's the only reason they're in this conversation, is because they're loaded talent-wise on both sides of the ball. And here's the important thing, along the trenches. They didn't just go out and get a bunch of skill players. Like they got Cam Ward and Damian Martinez and this transfer and that transfer at receiver. And they're loaded in the trenches as well, or at least they should be. And with the O-line, most of it's built through high school players. Highly ranked high school players, which is a recipe you and I always say that we like.
Sure.
If Cam Ward can keep his head on straight and show that he cares about more than just Cam Ward, Miami could end up being dangerous. and their schedule's very favorable. So those three to me, Louisville to me, again, there's a gap there. Somebody asked about NC State. I'm just not sold on NC State. They haven't been a legit title contender for years.
Yeah.
Grayson McCall's not the answer to them. Just, people thought Brennan Vernon was going to be that answer last year. McCall's not that answer this year. NC State's a good football team, no doubt, but they're just not a title contender to me.
And
it's really those big three to me.
Right. No, I'm with you on that one. And to me, there's even a gap between 1 and 2 down to 3. And, whoever you have at 3, I have Louisville 3, Miami 4, because I don't have a whole lot of faith that Cam Ward is going to be able to do what you just said he's going to be able to do, even though they have talent on that team and on all of those different things. I'm going to have to see it to believe it with Miami and the way that they put their roster together and just kind of the way they've been going about business. Not a huge fan, and maybe Mario Cristobal is the answer, but we haven't seen it yet. And I don't know if we're going to. And the weapon for hire that they got at quarterback, I just think he's in it for himself, not the team. And that doesn't work in college football. Yeah. I'm sorry. It just doesn't.
It's not a transfer portal thing. It's not. It's a specific to Cam Ward thing.
Right.
We just talked about Florida State. They have a portal quarterback who's a 1-year guy. Notre Dame has a portal guy. You look at our playoff predictions, Vince, and there are several teams that I have that have portal quarterbacks, guys that are going to be portal quarterbacks. I'm looking at it now. Just see, mine are 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 4 teams in the playoff with portal quarterback. First year at the team, portal quarterbacks. My issue is more about him. It's about Cam Ward. So that's really where I'm at with the ACC, Vince. There's a lot of you got to show me there.
Yep.
And here's NC State's another team. They've never been a real contender, but they don't have the roster that Miami's put together in the last 2 years through the portal and high school recruiting. That can't be ignored. What they've added the last 2 years from high school recruiting cannot be ignored. It isn't just they went out and had a good portal offseason.
Right.
There's a lot more to it than that. So that's kind of where I come from when it comes to Miami. I don't know, and again, I don't know that Mario Cristobal is that guy.
Exactly.
This is the same guy who got destroyed by Oregon twice when they played each other the last time he had a chance to have a title contending team. So there's a lot. I'm very much, Miami's one of the biggest show me teams of college football, but you can't dismiss that roster.
I get it.
It's a very, very talented roster.
So at the end of the day, I've got Florida State and Clemson playing for the ACC title, and I've got Florida State winning it.
Yeah.
So
that I got Clemson winning it. I have Florida State winning the regular season game and Clemson winning the rematch.
Gotcha. So that at least tells you that you will have Clemson in the top 4, and I have Florida State in the top 4. So if anybody's keeping track, if you're trying to figure out our rankings, so you at least know that after our first conference. Second conference to talk about, the one is that is just near and dear to all of our hearts, or at least just nearby. That would be the Big Ten. And so we're going to talk about the Big Ten right now. In no particular order, my title contenders for the Big Ten are Penn State, USC, Oregon, and Ohio State. Those are my 4. What say you?
I have 5 teams at least worth mentioning. You can't not mention Michigan. I mean, they're the defending Big Ten and national titles.
I'm just kidding.
Not national champions, right? So they have to be discussed. I just don't feel they're a team that really has a chance to win. There's just too much turmoil around that program. They don't have Jim Harbaugh to kind of harness it all. And you don't lose that many championships. You don't lose that many players from a championship team and still be as good with a completely revamped roster and a completely revamped coaching staff. So they're just not in it for me. Ohio State, Oregon, no brainers in this conversation. Penn State, the more I look at Penn State, the more I like Penn State and their chances for this year.
Yeah.
I really do.
Right.
And then the 4th team for me, honestly, is USC. I'm going to beat this drum until they prove me otherwise. This is going to be a much better USC team than last year. And we were having, it's sorry, I just had to respond to something in the chat.
Oh, okay.
People talking about DJ Uiagalelei is just a guy. I'm like, well, okay, agreed to disagree, but even he's still just a guy who won the ACC title. And the pushback is, well, lots of Jags win conference championships. My response is, isn't that what we're talking about? Aren't we talking about conference championships? So whatever.
Well, look, if you want to put Cam Ward and DJ next to each other, then that's fine.
Who has a winning record as a starter every year has ever played, and who's never been part of a winning team at the Power 5
level?
See,
and that's the thing. Like, okay, if we're just talking talent, yeah, Cam Ward has more talent. Sure.
Ridiculous.
Let's not even have that.
It's just ridiculous.
But like, yeah.
But anyway, back to the Big Ten. Ohio State, Oregon, those are my top 2 contenders. No brainers. 2 best rosters in the league. Easily 2 best rosters in the league. 2 teams with first-year portal quarterbacks, right? So we're not anti-portal, first-year portal quarterbacks. You've got Penn State, to me, is that next team. They're the sneaky team. I don't think Penn State has enough firepower on offense on the perimeter to beat one of those top 2 for the title.
Right.
But they have a couple things that could potentially go in their favor this year on defense, in the running game.
Sure.
And I like what they did at coordinator that could maybe make them a sneaky team. And their schedule sets up relatively well for them to have a good season. And then USC is who I was talking about before. There was a conversation in the chat yesterday about how USC just is not a good defensive team yet. And we don't know that they will be.
Right.
Because they haven't been. But I don't think Notre Dame fans appreciate enough how good of a hire DeAnton Lynn and Eric Henderson and Doug Belk were as a group. Any of them individually doesn't move the needle a ton. Obviously, DeAnton Lynn is their defensive coordinator. He's the guy that completely turned around UCLA last year. They had a terrible defense in 2022. He turned it around in 1 year, one off season. And then he's now at USC. Eric Henderson was the D-line coach at the Rams, and Doug Belk was the D coordinator at Houston, who Marcus Freeman interviewed as one of the finalists for the D coordinator job when he first got hired as the head football coach. Also, they had some very good portal pickups, and their secondary is going to be completely new outside of maybe one spot. But 2 of the portal pickups, I don't love portal pickups in the secondary. I don't love revamped secondaries, Vince, in the portal because there's so many different things you have to learn coverage-wise and all that. But in the unique case here, 2 of those kids are from UCLA. So John Humphrey and Kamari Ramsey are coming. They already know the defense. And so I think that's going to help them as well. So I think they're not going to be a great defense, but they're going to be a lot better on defense. I think that not having Caleb Williams is going to force Lincoln Riley to go back to scheming people and going back to being more balanced, which I think is going to make them a better team. So they may not be as talented at certain spots on offense, mainly quarterback, but I don't think that's going to be – I think they're going to be better on the O-line. I think they're going to be a more balanced offense, and they're going to be a lot better defensively. The problem is their schedule is really challenging.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only reason I don't have them as a legit potential title winner. But I do think USC is going to do some damage this year, and we'll have a say on who wins it, whether they're in the title game, which I don't predict, but it's possible. But more so, them beating a couple teams are going to knock somebody out of that conversation. That's kind of how I view the Big Ten this year, Vince.
Penn State is just that annual, like top 12-ish. Like they never meet expectations, but they're still a solid team. And Penn State people seem to be okay with that right now, right? I mean, they're always in the preseason talk in the conference, which therefore, if you're in the preseason talk for the Big Ten, then you are, at least at the very least on the outskirts talk of a national championship, right? I mean, that's just comes with the territory. And so they're always there in the preseason, it feels like, at least the last 5 or 10 years. And they always beat up on the not good teams, but then they blow it against the good teams. And with 2 to 3 losses, that always puts them in the top 15. And so they're always in the neighborhood. I think I saw a stat where if there was a 12-team playoff, like 6 of the last 8 or 9 years, they would have been in it, right? That's who Penn State is to me, right? And they could very well be a perennial lower half of the playoff team in the Big Ten. That could absolutely happen. It's going to be harder with the teams that they brought in. They've got some more teams to contend with now. And it's not obviously the same Big Ten this year as it was last year. But I do think that they're going to be right there in contention to make the playoff. Now, I don't think that they're good enough to do anything in the playoff because I just don't think they have a big game coach, right? And I think at the end of the day, no matter what kind of talent they have, he's not going to win you a big game. Like, he's just not going to win you a big game. And no matter where you fall in the playoff, especially if they're in the bottom half, they're going to be playing a better team because they're going to go on the road in that first round to someplace else. That's going to be a big game, and they're just not going to do well. And that's just who Penn State is to me until they show me that that's not who they are. And so that's why they're in quote unquote contention in the Big Ten. It's why I have them third, but I don't see them challenging either Ohio State or Oregon. I just don't. Right. And so it's like a distant third place, but third place nonetheless. And if you're third place in the Big Ten with all the clout that the Big Ten has, then you got a shot at making it into the playoff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's my take on Penn State.
Yeah.
And I will never be a Jeff Franklin believer until he gives me a reason to believe. And I don't.
Which is why we both have Ohio State and Oregon playing in the Big Ten title game.
Correct.
And we both have Ohio State winning.
Correct. So there you go. Ohio State's going to be in the top 4, and Oregon will probably be in the mix someplace. So moving on to the Big 12, Brian. My top 4, in no particular order: Oklahoma State, Utah, Kansas, and Kansas State. What say you, sir?
I think you have to at least consider Arizona worth mentioning because they won 10 games last year and they have a very dynamic core. They might have the best QB to receiver combination in the Big 12.
Okay.
Again, I don't think Noah Fafidi's as good as people make him out to be, but he doesn't suck. You know, he's a guy that can make some plays and he's got talent around him. I'm not in love with Arizona. I think they were a little smoke and mirrors last year. I think last year was kind of a fluky year. I don't think they repeat what they did last season. Utah's a legitimate contender to me. Oklahoma State's a legitimate contender to me. K-State's a legitimate contender to me. Those are the 3 teams I like the most. A sneaky team to keep an eye on is TCU. Okay. I think they were not as good as they were 2 years ago. That was a fluky year. They weren't as bad as they were last year. That was an equally fluky year in the opposite direction. So a lot of things went against them last year. A lot of close games that they lost last year that they won the year before. I think they kind of settle in. But I think the way that their schedule sets up and the talent they have coming back, if they can get good play at quarterback, I think TCU has a chance to surprise some people and potentially get up into that top 2. So they're the other team that I'm keeping an eye on, along with the others. Because I just think the talent at the top of that league is not so great that it dwarfs the rest of the league the way that Ohio State and Oregon, are just clearly the 2 best rosters there. Miami, Florida State, Clemson clearly have the 3 best rosters in the ACC. There's a big drop-off after that. SEC, sort of similar thing, big drop-off. Big 12 has a lot more teams that are closer together, which could result in there being a shakeup. And a team that we didn't talk about when we did the Big 12 playoff, but the more I study them, the more I'm like, this might just be one of those weird senior veteran returner-laden teams that shocks everybody, is Iowa State. Okay. They have like 20 starters coming back from last year. And, they weren't great last year, but they lost some close games. They were a team that battled. And then, of course, if Kansas can get Jalen Daniels healthy for a whole year, they could be in the mix, which is why we said last week, Vince, this is going to be the most entertaining league to watch. Mm-hmm. I just rattled off 6 or 7 teams that I think could sneak up in there and win the Big 12.
Sure.
That's not true anywhere else in college football amongst the power conferences. And part of it is because there's really good depth in the league. And the other part of it is because the top teams are not as dominant as the top teams in other leagues. And when you have closer rosters, little things like we're more experienced, our schedule is better, we have more continuity from a coaching standpoint. Those type of things can be separators, from other teams when you're in a league like the Big 12 where there are no superior teams, just a lot of really good teams. And that's what's going to make it a really fun league to watch. Really fun league to watch.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And we talked about this last Thursday when we did our Big 12 breakdown. I mean, it's almost like you could throw half the teams in the Big 12 into a hopper and just pull out one of those ping pong bowls and be like, okay, I could make a case for that. You know what I mean? Like, it's the most wide open, I think, of all 4 of the Power 4 conferences. It's going to be the most fun to watch. And this is going to be the one where, because of the parity within that conference, it's where they may get the least amount of teams into the playoff, just because they're going to be knocking each other off. You know what I mean? And I think there's a potential for a really good team to get left out at the end of the day. I think that's an absolute possibility with the Big 12, but there's only so many slots. So we'll kind of see how it plays out. But at the end of the day, Brian, who do you have in your championship game? And then who do you have winning it?
K-State, Oklahoma State. I have K-State winning the league.
Okay. So we both share Oklahoma State in the finals, and then we also share Oklahoma State losing in the championship game, and I have Utah winning the whole thing. So Utah gets my automatic bid, with Oklahoma State hoping to get an at-large.
In the chat, again, somebody just mentioned UCF. That's another team that you could probably bring up as a potential.
That's what I'm saying.
Like you with KJ Jefferson, the quarterback. Like I love this league.
Yeah,
it's going to be so much fun.
You can make a case for like 7 teams, basically.
Yes, I think I just listed 8 teams: K-State, Kansas, Oklahoma State, Utah, Arizona, TCU, Iowa State, and UCF all got mentions as that's 8 of the 16 Big 12 teams.
Right.
Like, God, this league is going to be so much fun to watch this year. I cannot wait to watch the Big 12. I mean, again, no great teams and all that, but like the
parity is.
I don't even call it parity. I mean, I hate that word parity. I know what you mean by that. Competitiveness. It's going to be a competitive league. Because, Vince, you're correct. Technically, you're correct. But when people say parity, they normally mean mediocre.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't take it that way.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a really fun league, dude.
Yeah, my definition of parity is that anybody can win on any day. Yeah. Like that's my idea of parity.
That is correct. It's going to be a very competitive league.
Right.
Very competitive league. And that's why I said I knew exactly as I shut you down. I was like, I know what you meant by parity. It's like the word game manager at quarterback. That's meant to be a compliment, but it's turned into an insult.
It's never taken like that. Yeah,
right. Exactly. So the Big 12 is going to be a fun league to watch this year.
So our last conference to talk about in this segment is the SEC, and we kept them for last because, I don't know, S is at the end of the alphabet. So that's why the SEC is last.
And I do think they're going to be the best Power 4 team in this league.
And I don't disagree.
I'm not one of those people that every year, ACC is the dominant. You know that I don't feel that way. But this year, I do think that they are the best league, the best Power 4 league.
If you take whoever you think is the number 3 team in the SEC and you put them up against whoever you think is the number 3 team in the other Power 3 conferences, or the other Power 4 conferences, excuse me, I don't think it's close. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think it's close.
You take their how many?
Like, if you take the number 3 team in the SEC and you match it up with the number 3 team in the other 3 Power 4 conferences, I don't think it's that close.
The Big Ten, maybe. If Penn State is better than we think it is, maybe.
Right.
And if Miami figures it out coaching-wise, they at least have I get it. They at least have the talent to do so.
Yeah.
But I'm likely to agree with you. The other part of it is who finishes third.
Right.
That part of like, so if the team that I'm predicting finishes third, then your answer is absolutely correct.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So that kind of finishes, that's part of it too. I think you could even go down to the 4th team in the SEC.
Right. Well, and then
with a lot of other people's number 3 team.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So the depth, I think, is better than the other leagues, and that's absolutely the point that I was making. It gets even worse if you go to the number 4 SEC and you compare it to the 4s across.
They're 5, they're 6, or really. No, I don't think they're 5 and 6 have a chance to win the title.
Right.
Because of how good the teams at the top are.
Sure.
It's a very deep league.
Right.
Very deep league.
So my 4, in no particular order, are Texas, Alabama, Ole Miss, and Georgia. Those are my 4 at the top of the SEC.
You said Texas, Ole Miss, Georgia, Alabama, right?
Yes.
Agree? All 4 of those are in my title contenders. There's one team that I do think has to at least be discussed as a potential sleeper team.
Okay.
And that's LSU.
I knew you were going to say that.
Like, you can't dismiss the talent they have coming back on offense. Their quarterback, Nussmeier, has played a lot of football during his career, and he's got some ability. They have, and here's the thing, though, Vince, they're going to have one of the best O-lines in the SEC, and they're going to be very talented on the perimeter. You can't ignore that. Now, do I think they're going to win the SEC? No. Could they sneak in as the number 2? Potentially. Their schedule's challenging. The reason I say I don't think they have really a much of a shot is still their defense just doesn't have great talent. I know, but they revamped their staff. They brought in Coach Davis, Coach D-line. They brought in Coach Baker to be their D coordinator. I mean, they've revamped some things. I believe they brought Coach Raymond back to be their DB coach, they've had success with in the past. I believe they brought him back this year. You know, the problem is they just don't, outside of Harold Perkins and a couple guys, they just still lack talent on defense. That's the problem. And I think that's going to be their undoing, but I think there's enough talent, and Brian Kelly had one of his better off seasons from a coaching changes standpoint in his career, that I think LSU at least needs some conversation here, in my opinion. Tennessee is a team that people are going to talk about. They lost way too much on defense, in my opinion, for them to be in this conversation. They're going to be better than they were last year, Vince. They lost way too much on defense. And Oklahoma, I'm just not a believer in Oklahoma. You lost 5 starting offensive linemen, and you're getting ready to head to the SEC. That's a bad recipe, bad combination of factors. So I'm not on the Oklahoma hype train. Tennessee's not Missouri's not a legitimate contender to me. I know that they're highly ranked. I just don't see it with Missouri. I think they lost too much off their defense, including players and coaches, and they're just not a team that reloads the way that other teams do. So, but again, that's a lot of teams that other people might mention as potential contenders in the SEC. And again, it just shows how deep this league is of really good football teams. Like, the Big 12 is deep in really quality teams. The SEC is deep in really, really quality teams. You know what I mean? And that's the difference between the two. But those are the teams that I view as contenders: Georgia, Texas, Alabama, Ole Miss, and LSU. That's my legitimate teams that I think are going to be playoff contenders as well as potential title contenders.
And then who do you have in your title game?
I have Texas versus Alabama.
Okay.
And I have Alabama winning.
Okay.
Caleb Georges has the number of Steve Sarkisian so far.
Okay. I have Texas and Georgia in the final, and I have Georgia winning it. So, and you know, to kind of go back to the SEC breakdown that we did, I've got Texas winning the regular season matchup between Georgia and Texas, and then Georgia winning the rematch in the SEC title game. So just for context purposes, yeah. So that's where I'm at with that. So anything else to say about the conferences, Brian?
Do you want to know who I have winning the SEC?
Yeah, you said
I told you who was in it.
I thought you said who won.
Nope.
You said Sarkisian doesn't have what it takes against.
That's right. I didn't say I did, but I didn't say it. You're correct.
Okay.
I didn't say that, but
sorry, I just processed that.
No, it's my fault. You read me correctly. I have Alabama winning it.
Okay. All right.
I do.
So you've got Alabama getting the automatic seed. I've got Georgia getting the automatic.
I will
seed.
say this, Vince. I think Georgia's a better team than Alabama. The difference is their schedule.
Sure.
That's the big thing for me. Their schedule sets up. Alabama's schedule sets up way better, in my opinion, than Georgia's, and that's why I think Alabama's going to win the league. I think Alabama's going to be a much better team than people think. I don't think they're the best team in the SEC. I think their schedule sets up best. They get Georgia at home. They get Missouri at home. They get Auburn at home. They don't have to play Ole Miss. They don't have to play Texas. They have to play at LSU, at Tennessee, and at Oklahoma, which, again, is why I've said nobody's going undefeated this year.
Sure.
But I just think Georgia's schedule's way tougher, in my opinion. So I have Alabama winning that league.
Okay. So there you have it. That's our conference breakdown for who is going to make it, who is going to be in contention, who is going to win, and therefore get the automatic seeds. So that's going to do it for part 1 of our show today. Make sure you hit the like button, the subscribe button, the notification bell, share with your family and friends, and of course, jump on the boards.irishbreakdown.com for all your intel and Notre Dame team needs. It's all there. So make sure you get on it.